The Underpowered Hour on this week's show. Discovery turns 35 with 2 slick anniversary editions. A Fast and Furious Range Rover hits the market, and China's Yang Wang U8 brings luxury tank vibes. Plus, Ike's got a new toy and tips for wiring your Land Rover. And now, here's the show.
Welcome to the Underpowered Hour. I'm Steve Beres, mild-mannered television executive by day and Land Rover collector by night. You can find out more about our cars and what we're working on at theberescollection.com or follow us on Instagram at theberescollection. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Goss.
Thank you to everyone joining us today. I am the straight 30 weight to Stevens 0 W20. I'm the higher viscosity host of podcasting, Ike Goss.
I own and operate Pangle and 4x4 in Springfield, Oregon, where we live and breathe Land Rovers. Check us out online on Facebook, Instagram at Pangle and 4x4. Let's get started.
All right, Ike. Well, this week in the news, 35th anniversary edition of the Land Rover Discovery. Remember the Land Rover Discovery? That's apparently still a car, and you can now get a 35th anniversary. In fact, 2 35th anniversary editions of the car. One's not enough when you've got a car as popular in the market as the Land Rover Discovery. You want to make sure you throw a couple of those out there so that people can really sink their teeth into these special editions.
What is the 35th anniversary? Is it the plastic anniversary? Is it at the?
It is. That's right.
The
It's like that black
anniversary.
It's that black plastic that fades really quickly in the sun.
I seem to have a lot of that recently.
Yeah, that's the one. It's that the 2 models, the Discovery Tempest, and the Discovery Gemini.
Gemini? Is that how they say it in Canada?
Gemini.
Gemini cricket?
Gemini. It really depends on who you talk to, because if you look at the Gemini program or the Gemini program, the space program, depending on which astronaut you reference, they say it differently.
No, they don't.
Gemini cricket. Yeah. Anyways, apparently these 2 models are available now for order from your local Land Rover dealer. If you can convince them that they still sell Discoveries, that is, you can have them. They're interesting. They have a different colored roof, which back in the day was obviously somewhat popular as a mod to your Discoveries. I've seen lots of Discoveries that probably because the sunroofs have caused the roof to completely rot out. They put a white roof on a black car or something like that.
I think there's 2 reasons for that. One, the sort of classic Defenders had a white roof in some instances. 2, it keeps the sun from heating up the interior quite so much. Yeah. And also the clear coat on those early 90s Discoveries, I think, was just garbage. Immediately peeled off,
almost
sloughed off in sheets
upon delivery. Every time you go in to wash it, you just get big flaps of. It's just terrible.
Of clear
but yeah, the first one, the Gemini, is about kind of a reddish sort of color. Would you call that like a burgundy kind of color? Maybe something in that. What is
the official title for that color?
6 different paste colors in seating. That I believe is Sedona Red. It borrows from the Defender, which apparently the Sedona Edition Defender, right? So not even a new paint color.
So, I was going to say, wait a minute. So the anniversary Discovery does not have its own paint color?
I guess it doesn't. It does have a special black paint accents, meaning they painted the roof black, and
they just didn't paint it. They just left it in the factory primer.
That's right. It's just factory primer. So
it's actually less expensive to produce the anniversary edition.
The grille is surrounded in stealth black. And then the grille and everything else is just the regular silvery color. It has the little silvery, what looks like a skid plate, but is made of plastic.
Okay.
So, I mean, it is a skid plate. It's just a disposable skid plate.
In case you run over a plastic rock, it's fine.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
One of those little key hiding rocks.
They get their own branding graphics, unique branding graphics, with the Gemini doing a double helix pattern on its fuel filler cap. Fuel filler cap accents. That's always nice.
How substantial are these anniversary editions in terms of being special?
I would say just barely. Just barely. Land Rover calls the 2025 Land Rover Discovery Tempest the most luxurious, comfortable, and highly specified Discovery vehicle ever produced.
What? It's like
Ever?
Didn't they make an amphibious one at one time?
They always make one into a boat. So, I mean, I would say this is less specified than the boat one, right?
It has a special fuel filler cap. It has some special paint.
Yep.
What else has it got?
It's Carpathian gray, which is a color they've had forever. And it has a copper gloss roof. I'm sorry.
Here's the description from Land Rover of this vehicle. You ready?
I'm ready.
Elegantly stylish, ruggedly capable, and dynamically versatile enough to take out for a light jog.
That's right. That's right.
What?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with the Discovery. Again, now they've got one with like weird copper accents and stuff. Like, is that really what people were looking for? Finally, now I'm going to go out and buy the Discovery because the roof is copper. I don't know.
Further description. The Discovery Gemini is the perfect all-arounder to celebrate the model's history of seductively mating form with function.
So my.
Is that kind of weird using the phrase seductively mating in the description?
Well, it's not
of this
aggressively.
car?
It's not aggressively mating. It's seductively mating.
It's kind of weird. It's weird. It's weirding me out. I don't know. Do you think
not
this
the
is
kind of language you want to associate with the Discovery?
Do you think this is a miss or a hit?
I like everything in the world of Discovery. I just think it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
It just doesn't matter.
You don't think it matters in the context of Range Rover and Defender?
I just don't think so. I don't know who's buying Discovery right now. I don't know why they would over a 130 or over a Range Rover Sport, or there's just so much cross over top of the Discovery.
Yeah.
It just doesn't stand out anymore. The old Discovery used to be that it was nicer than a Defender, but more capable than a Range Rover, right? It was sort of like you describe a Discovery to people that way. Now, the Defender is equally, and I would say obviously more so capable, but way nicer. Like, it's as nice as a Range Rover in some trims of Defender because there's 900 different trims of Defenders. And now there's a Range Rover like starting at, Costco pricing all the way up to one that costs more than the Costco itself and everything in between. So it's sort of like, what do you need a Discovery for when you can you overlap Defender and Range Rover by probably, I'm sure there's 4 or 5 models of high-end Defender that are capable and contrary to, 4 or 5 models of lower end Range Rovers. So where does the Discovery even fit? There's just no place for it. It's really weird. So I don't know, and I don't know how to fix that.
So you think it's the solution to a problem that doesn't exist?
I think it is now, yeah. It wasn't when the Defender was highly utility and when the Range Rover was kind of too expensive / much fancier, right? But as soon as you make a cheaper, less fancy Range Rover and you make like an Octa or something like that, a way more fancy, way more expensive Defender, and even the base Defender is as nice as any Discovery that has existed previously. It's like, where do you go? I don't know. I guess copper roof. That's where you go.
No, you've had one of these Discoveries, right? You had one of these and you liked it, right?
Loved it. It was a car. It was really comfortable. It was what the Defender is now. It was a Range Rover trim level inside with a way more capable drivetrain that you didn't feel like you were taking a $300,000 Range Rover out in the mud and ruts. The problem is that the body type and the way that it's been engineered wasn't super adaptable to accessories and things. Like putting a winch on it is really hard. There's not really ways to mount things to it. There's no, there's none of those there's no factory snorkel, all that sort of like, oh, well, of course a Land Rover has that stuff. Not that you need a factory snorkel, but they didn't even come up with any of those parts because they're like, nobody's using it for that.
Yeah.
And then the Defender came in, and especially for us, there's no way we go back to a Discovery, even as nice as it is. There's no way we would go back to it because the Defender does everything the Discovery does, but it kind of does it better. And it's just as nice. I mean, maybe it's not quite as nice as the Discovery, but if you want something really, really nice, then you buy a Range Rover. You know?
Yeah, the proportions of the newer Discoveries are so much different than the older ones. Like, you look at the Discovery 1, 2, 3, even the LR 3 and 4, there's a real emphasis on cargo carrying capacity, which is evident in the profile of the vehicle. Like, you look at it from the side, and it has a lot of visual weight on the back of the car. And you're like, oh, that vehicle is meant for hauling people and gear and stuff and whatever. But the new one, there's not much behind the rear wheel. There's not much space in the rear load space. The middle passenger compartment has been expanded, so there's a lot of room for middle passengers, which is great. But there's not much room behind that for stuff.
No, that's right. And there's extra, you can have the third row of seats, and it's really neat. It's mechanized and all that kind of stuff. It's cool, but it doesn't do that better than the 130. Maybe there's a little bit more headroom and stuff back there, but it doesn't do that job better than the 130. And when those seats are folded down, the 130 has more space in it. It's sort of like, I don't know. I think if they were going to make the 130, they had to understand that was basically going to wipe out the market for the Discovery, because the only place you would want it is with that third row and with all those things that like Range Rover doesn't do, right? Like Range Rover doesn't do third rows. Range Rover doesn't do, it's not meant for that. It doesn't do hauling and towing and stuff. But
I mean, it does tow. It has a pretty healthy
it's
tow
a great
rating.
towing.
And, I will say that it definitely looks a lot sportier, if that's what you're going for, than a 130. The 130 it's got a lot of visual weight behind the rear wheel, if you know what I mean.
A lot of junk in that trunk. But if you're looking for something sporty, are you not going to go for a Range Rover Sport, a Velar, all those sort of things? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but...
Yeah, well,
anyways,
all the Discoveries available currently in the Land Rover dealer network are apparently special editions, all two of them.
All two of them, yes. That you can get the Gemini or you can get the other one. And so head out now, get your copper roof before it turns green like the Statue of Liberty. So it's going to be great. Speaking of get it before it's gone, there is a very, very famous car from possibly one of the greatest film franchises of modern time, maybe, dare I say, of all time, Fast and the Furious. And I actually think technically this car is from the film Fast and Furious, which I'm not exactly sure where that sits in the 27 Fast and Furious films that there are. They all sort of blend together. No one, I don't care who says so, no one can tell you if they've seen them all or not. It's impossible to know. You go into kind of a fugue state where maybe you've seen them all, maybe you've seen none, you don't know. Right? It's it's one of those. But it is a Range Rover, an L322 Range Rover that was used in the production of that film. It's my favorite Range Rover, by the way. But this one is just a little bit different. So what it looks like they've done is like a Halloween pumpkin. They've scooped out all the guts of it. So from the what looks like the back door forward, they've taken the roof, the middle of the roof off, and the back door out, and then they've sort of stuck a bunch of wood in there, such as that it looks like there's a gun turret up on top of the Range Rover. There's some sort of steel tubing that is sort of made a rudimentary roll cage. And then you've got looks like a hood scoop also maybe made of wood, and a little brush bar possibly made of wood or plastic or fiberglass or something. But it is certainly a unique Range Rover.
So this is like a movie car. It's not for really using, right?
I don't believe the turret is functional. I think it actually just looks like an ammo box with a pipe stuck into it, I guess. It's also worth noting that this is from the Fast and Furious Hobbs and Shaw, which is a spin-off series.
So it's not even the actual...
It's not even the core. It's not the Vin Diesel one. Okay. It's The Rock and Jason Statham in this one, which I may say is actually a better franchise than the original. I disagree. I think Tokyo Drift is the best one. But yeah, so if you wanted an L322 with a bunch of wood stuck on it and something that looked kind of like a machine gun sticking out of the roof, it could be yours. It is up on, and we'll have this link in the show notes, it's up on the Hemmings website right now.
It was previously for sale on Barrett-Jackson, correct?
I think they tried to auction it and it didn't go. Oh, and the asking price right now is $29,900, and you can contact the seller. Funny enough, the seller is the Ford family auto collection.
Oh, that's interesting.
You think that's like Ford, like Henry Ford family?
Couldn't say. Yeah, in the Barrett-Jackson auction, they had 3 of them. maybe.
Yeah.
I think they were like
possible.
the bad guy vehicles. And
Yes,
they
that's
were
correct.
auctioning them
Yes.
off, and they weren't all the same. Like one was damaged, in the. But how much of this vehicle is hot glue?
Oh, I would say 90% of it at this point. Yeah, it's not good. And that wood has been sitting, what looks like outside in Florida for the past, since that film came out. I don't know, several years ago, right? So
That's always
not
good
great.
for wood
painted
accessories,
wood.
right?
Yeah, wooden accessories. Now, what I do like about the photo that they have on the Barrett-Jackson website is that they have put a tire dressing on the tires. So that's
critical.
really shined them up. That really makes all the difference.
It's important for an online auction.
It is.
Did you know
I think so.
Bring a Trailer has their own line of tire shine now?
Do they?
No, I'm just teasing.
That makes total sense. That makes total sense. And that super slippery interior cleaner that like you get in the back bench seat and you just slide all the way through to the other side and out the other door.
Slide onto the floor.
It's great. It's good. Anyways, if you want a little piece of Fast and Furious history, because this is certainly it, head on over to the old Hemmings website.
Why is it that the Russian bad guys always drive these cars?
You have to. And it has to be kind of black gray, right? And it has to be like kind of modified. Well, because it's in a Fast and Furious movie, it has to be modified, right? There has to be some junk that they strap to the outside of it. Now, I'm not sure. It isn't immediately noticeable here if I think the answer is yes, that you can stick out of this turret. There doesn't seem to be any information about it.
Just a seat?
I think you can. Yeah, are you just sitting on the roof, or can you actually go up through? Because that would have been the sunroof on this car, right? That would have had one of those full length sunroof things. So it looks like they might have just popped out the sunroof and taken the back door off, and that way there's probably not actually like body modifications so much as they've screwed a hood scoop onto the hood, and certainly you couldn't undo this situation, but they may not have actually cut into the actual frame of the car at all. It may just be that they took the sunroof out and put a turret through it.
I'm just reading now on an enthusiast forum where someone has posted some information about these cars, and according to this gentleman who's posted here, he says 16 of them in total were supplied to Universal by JLR in 2007. So these cars are about 20 years old almost.
Well, yeah, that would make sense. This is a 2006 Range Rover, right? An early L322.
He says he knows that definitely 6 of them were stored in a warehouse near Harlow and then removed on trailers back in 2021 to a destination unknown. So there's possibly 15 others out there, and maybe some damaged ones. I don't know. But
because this is a little article I'm reading here on the description in the Hemmings that says one of 3 Land Rovers used in the 2019 film Fast and Furious Hobbs Shaw.
There's a lot of differences. I'm seeing some differences in some of the ones that are posted online. Like some of them have these funky hood scoops, and some of them have a turret. Some of them don't have a turret. Some of them have a gun on the turret. Some of them don't. So there's some variation in these things, but some of them are wrecked and some of them aren't. But there's definitely several, more than one.
There's more than one without question. And if you're into movie cars, and I have friends that are into movie cars, collect movie cars, because honestly, they're usually something you can collect really cheap. If you get them firsthand from the studio, when the studio just blows out whatever they're getting rid of, because obviously movies are little LLCs that are set up just to make the movie, and they have to liquidate all of their assets. So once their studio's archive has gone through and taken anything that they want, then usually we'll just liquidate the rest of it for basically nothing, because it's fit its purpose already. We've paid for it, right? The reason we have it is to make the movie, and then once we're done with it, we don't really care anymore. So if you can get it directly from like a studio auction, or sometimes from the vehicle preparers, they'll get rid of them sometimes, like Cinema Vehicle Services here in LA or something. If you can get in touch with those people, movie cars are cheap to buy, and then they immediately get resold based on the fact that they're a movie car, and people perceive that as some kind of value point. But whether it is or not is completely up to you. If you're the biggest Fast and Furious fan in the world, having the Fast and Furious Range Rover might be the ultimate piece of your collection. If you're just some guy that likes Range Rovers, this probably diminishes the value of this car. So it really depends. I think it's a low chance that The Rock or Jason Statham have ever touched this car.
In the photos in this thread, there's an interior shot, and these vehicles look like they have a much extended handbrake handle, maybe without a ratchet to do those J turns and stuff.
Most likely, yeah, that makes sense. They have a drift or a rally handbrake.
Something else.
Cool.
Yeah, check it out.
I don't know how that works in a 4-wheel drive vehicle, but whatever. It's a good times. Good times. So yeah, head on over
Maybe
to the
they're
old Hemmings.
converted to 2-wheel drive now that you bring that up.
They could be. Yeah, they may just take the front prop shaft out and make it a rear-wheel drive car. Possibly. If you want to do that kind of stuff, you'd have to. So there you go. Could be a partially working.
Speaking of doors flying open.
Yeah, so the old Ineos Grenadier, our good friends there at the Ineos Chemical Company, and their, Defender, let's call it a tribute vehicle.
Vehicle.
The Grenadier. More tribute than maybe they intended in that now, like His Majesty's Land Rover, the doors are randomly coming open on some Grenadiers.
I mean, is it random? We could have predicted this, right?
When you design your vehicle after a Defender, you're going to get some of the bad with the good.
When you claim to be the spiritual successor of a vehicle whose doors pop open, this is going to happen, right?
This is going to happen. You're going to have it.
It's going to happen.
Apparently, this is caused by a lack of grease in some of the mechanisms that are causing one of the door latches to not latch all the way, and then some button failure, some other things, and pop goes the door.
You would think it'd be caused by too much grease.
I would think so too, right? Yeah. This case not greasy enough.
Not greasy enough. It's a fine line between too much and too little grease.
It's I think in all things, right? Not just doors.
Really?
I think that's a motto I try to live by.
Oh.
Just the right amount of grease. But
don't look in Steven's bedside table, let me tell you.
Speaking of Imitation Land Rovers, one of our favorite segments, this week we have one of, without question, this show's favorite vehicle manufacturers, and that is Yang Wang.
Yang Wang is a brand of BYD.
Exactly.
It's a nameplate, but it's hard to get tired of saying Yang Wang, to be honest.
You just can't. And this one, I think this is a perfect example of where translation is so important when naming a vehicle, because this particular one is the Yang Wang U8.
Yang Wang U8. That just rolls off the tongue.
It sure does. In a way that, both actually and spiritually. Yes, the Yang Wang U8 is a awfully Defender inspired.
Yeah.
Almost could be a Defender from a Fast and Furious film with the way that it is.
I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with little silvery bits seemingly unnecessarily placed all over the place, and
it's got kind of a Cadillac accent vibe going on in the front grille area.
Yeah, it does. It does look it's got that big, expansive, chromy kind of, sort of expanded metally looking grille.
The profile, though, it's very Land Rover-y. The rear roof profile, the color of the roof, the, sheen of it's very Land Rover Defender-esque. The new Defender, I should say.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Yes. This definitely is a new Defender homage, to say the least. Some may say direct ripoff of the classic McGovern design. Hard to say, but yeah, I mean it's featured most frequently in its sort of like, what would you call that color? Like a seafoam kind of situation.
Yeah, it's like a metallic medium blue color, some silver accents. They're claiming this is their first off-road, edition or vehicle that they're making, but it doesn't look very off-roady. It's just it's got big wheels. It's got But I will say I've read previously and seen videos of a special feature that this has that Land Rover doesn't have.
And what's that?
Emergency floating mode.
Oh, yes, of course. The emergency floating mode.
Emergency floating mode. So the vehicle can float for some particular period of time and even can propel itself a little bit in the water.
Now, is that a big enough deal this is obviously a Chinese-built car, primarily, I think, sort of targeted towards the Chinese market. Is that a big deal in China? Are you finding yourself suddenly...
Yeah.
In a body of water?
I think the fear of flooding is pretty significant in certain parts of China.
Okay. And so that's a real thing. Meaning, if this car was just parked along the side of the street, would it just start floating when there was, a flood or something?
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true or not, but probably would. Probably it would be buoyant enough.
And then assuming you could catch up with it and somehow get into it without it sinking, then you'd be.
I think the
set.
concern is really that you're in the car while the flood happens, not that your car is gonna like succumb to some sort of flood because it's like in a parking spot and the floodwaters rise
at the local Shenzhen Whole Foods.
It has an anchor that you just throw out the side.
I hope so. The interior is really, really, really nice. It sort of evokes a little bit of like a Porsche SUV, kind of it's got the handles kind of along the center column. The center column looks as though it's built in a way that you couldn't interact with the passenger if you wanted to. There's just no way. It's quite a high wall, which I think is just part of the Chinese design aesthetic. They love a good wall there in China. Some great walls they've done in the past. All the best walls, greatest walls. And they have, it's, nicely equipped with entertainment system and all that sort of business that you would expect. And three little built-in, would you call those rally lights or roof-adorned lights along the top there? And that's then mirrored on the dash by three little vents that are sort of the same. Which I think, a lot of is three. Is that a lucky number of things? I know Chinese culture, it's really important to have certain numbers are very important. Is 3 one of them?
I'm sure it probably is. Seems like an important number.
And they have, and then they have like lots of little swoopy doos and little silvery bits. Almost, it's that same silver that you would paint the cappings of a series vehicle if you were an asshole. That's the kind of paint that adorns this car, which is great. I have to say there are elements of this car, if I'm being completely honest, I might like a little bit more than the Defender.
Which are those elements?
Well, the roof line feels a little more like the classic Defender. It looks like there's a little bit more cargo space at the back because it's not quite as sloped in as the Defender is. It looks like certainly, the wheelbase is definitely like this is 130 sized. This is not 110 size. This is a big boy. And I like the option for the factory roof lights. I'm not sure I like how this is executed, but I do like the fact that they have thought about those sort of things.
How do you feel about the rear-mounted spare tire?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm never a fan of spare tires with that big plastic cover over top of it. Did you notice that the newest Glendewagen has a spice rack in the place of where a rear tire would normally go?
I have not seen
to kind of make it look like maybe there's a spare tire there, but it's not really a spare tire. It's like a little semi-square little storage area back there.
I have not seen that. It's got a little...
Because I don't think anybody has ever put that tire from the back of their Glendewagen on the Glendewagen in the parking lot at the Whole Foods in Beverly Hills. It's just not something you do.
There was a period of time where those came only with a chrome spare tire cover.
That's true. That's true. That's true. I remember that.
But now there's like a suitcase on the back.
Now there's a little suitcase. That's right. Yeah, there's a little tiny suitcase. You put your little, I don't know what you put in there, but speaking of putting suitcases in your vehicle, one of my other favorite segments here on the show, Ike buys another stupid car.
What?
And
I thought we weren't talking about this.
It's a fan favorite segment.
All right.
So what's this week's Ike stupid car?
I bought another Land Rover, 1966 Series IIA 88.
That's
it's original paint. It's pastel green. It's got a limestone hardtop. It's got a winch. It's got a few little accessories, some BFG tires. It was a car that I saw in Southern Oregon last year, and I kind of put the bug in the owner's ear, and he called me up and was like, yeah, I think I'm ready to let it go. I'm really more of he's really like a Chevy guy,
Oh, yeah. What was he doing with the Land Rover in the first place?
I think that he bought it out of an estate. The previous owner clearly cared about it a lot, and put some nice accessories on it. Drove it quite a bit, but this is not the vehicle you were hoping. I would talk about.
Sounds nice. It sounds like it would be a nice companion to your Volkswagen Westfalia, which is a vehicle you and I both share a fondness for. I had one back in high school.
Well, I actually have a fondness not for Volkswagen, but for Steyr-Puch. As you know, I have a Steyr-Puch Haflinger.
Yep, the Haflinger is a lot of fun,
and it's a great vehicle. A really interesting scale and neat engineering that went into that vehicle. It is an
interesting scale. That's a great way to describe it. It is a really interesting scale.
Yeah,
yeah.
Not the sort of thing that you want to hear when you get undressed, but when you're talking about cars, that's pretty fascinating.
It certainly is.
So, in addition to Haflingers, Steyr-Puch also made Pinzgauers, and they did a bunch of work for other vehicle manufacturers, including Volkswagen, and they produced the VW Syncro. And the Syncro is a four-wheel drive platform. They used it in some of their cars, and they also used it in the Vanagons. And so this is a four-wheel drive Vanagon camper.
Mm-hmm. It is. I had both the Westfalia and a Vanagon, actually, neither of which, unfortunately, were the Syncro. I've always wanted a Syncro Westfalia because they're super cool. And, they're ultra popular in Canada, right? Oh, man. People in Canada will pay nearly retail, like new retail for a four-wheel drive Westfalia because they are so sought after. Mm-hmm. And they're great. I mean, just the standard Westfalia, it's really an interesting way that they've sort of, appointed the interior. They've got a really nice layout for how everything works. They, and the Vanagon itself is just a good platform for that, right? It's just a big boxy empty van. And
I think, we have a Dormobile, and the Dormobile is great, and I love the Dormobile, and the Dormobile does a lot, and it's also a lot older than the Vanagon. It's like 20 years older than the
20
Vanagon.
20 years older, yeah.
So it's kind of old, long in the tooth, I guess, when the Vanagon came out. And so in that respect, I think it holds up quite well, Mm-hmm. The Syncro Westfalia, I think, has some interesting things about it. It has a rear locker, which is cool.
Yeah.
And it had an optional front locker, I believe, that you could get. So you could get front and rear lockers with a disconnect for the four-wheel drive. So you could have two-wheel drive, and then you could have four-wheel drive with lockers, which is cool.
And are they like a partially limited slip, or are they like a hard locking?
No, they're a locking differential. There are limited slips that are available for the Syncro front differential and maybe even the rear differential. But they have.
Are they lever activated?
No, they have a knob on the dash that you pull, and it's vacuum.
Okay. Oh, it's vacuum. Oh, okay. Like the
vacuum operating lockers.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's kind of a neat feature of these. There's a lot of enthusiast support, as you say. Yeah. I've seen these vehicles at the Unimog Fest that they have nearby here. A lot of the Vanagon guys show up and they bring their Syncros and whatever. I think that we were talking about the difference between the Dormobile and the Vanagon. The Dormobile succeeds because it's a small footprint. Yeah. And it does a lot. The seats fold into a dinette, or they fold out into a bed, or they fold into two beds, actually. And then there's cots upstairs, and it has a sink and a stove. And, the Westfalia has all of that. And, it is the same footprint. Yeah. And it has two beds, similar to the Dormobile. It has an upper berth and a lower, seat that folds into a bed. So it theoretically could sleep four, if you wanted it to.
Be a very intimate for.
Not really. I mean, you are separated upper and lower. It's kind of like a bunk bed, in that way. So it's not too bad, but there's just enough more space in the Vanagon because it's a forward control layout.
Yeah,
that really helps ease the crampedness of the Dormobile, and the entry and exit from the camping space is a lot lower. The sliding door is a lot easier to get in and out of. The front seats rotate very easily to face the rear. So in terms of setting it up, oh my gosh, so much easier than Dormobile. I mean, there's nothing that the Vanagon does that the Dormobile doesn't do.
Right.
It's just easier.
It's just easier.
It's just easier.
It's just easier. Having that sliding door and all that sort of stuff, it makes a difference. And the fact that they still make essentially a version of the Westfalia to this day is, I think, just a testament to, Now, not to say I wouldn't want to see a Dormobile new Defender. I'm absolutely down for that. Talk about cramped, but I would be down if they want to do a flip open, an accordion roof on a new Defender.
Even if the seats just folded out into a bed, that'd be sweet.
Right? That'd be great too. Yeah.
So we're gonna see what it's like. I've only camped in it a couple nights, but so far it's pretty interesting, the differences, and obviously I appreciate that Steyr-Puch heritage.
Yeah, that's
Austrian
cool.
made.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
No, I like it. I'd like one. I got to get in there, get in the market. I almost bought a automobile this past weekend, as you know, but
you sent me some pictures of it.
Been murdered if I had purchased it. So
I would have been fully supportive. There's always a couch you can sleep on here.
That's right. That's fair enough. I think you were in the will. You get all these Land Rovers. Find killed.
Is that a threat?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. So, and finally, a quick tech tip in the world of Land Rovering, as we have talked about many times. Those things are, as they got longer in their development cycle, got more and more wires inside of them, and that has become, that one task where people say, I'm just not ready to tackle that wiring harness as it is smoking and sparking and causing headlights to flash on and off and all of that sort of stuff. I have to admit, I am in that, I'm in that pool of people, as I have done it before, and I know that I don't like doing it. But you are in the midst of doing some wiring harness work there up at the old Pangolin 4x4.
Yeah.
What are your feelings? You just make Linus do it, or what's the deal?
That's exactly what happens. Yeah, just let him loose. He usually only burns up a couple of them before he gets it.
Yeah, before he gets it real good. Yeah, he's
like
a ferret. He just kind of gets in there and.
No, he's quite good, and he's good at soldering. And there's not a lot of soldering to installing a wire harness, if we're being honest. But he's nothing if not patient.
That's true. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes, it's a lot of fishing. It's a lot of pulling. It's a lot of. So first of all, where do the majority of your wiring harnesses for your restorations or repairs come from? Where do you?
Yeah, so I think vintage automobile wiring harnesses tend to be kind of expensive. If you restore American cars or even European cars, you'll often see wiring harnesses available, and many of them are $1,000 or more, depending on what type of car it is. And, they're not that complicated. But I think we're really fortunate with Land Rovers in that there are suppliers for Land Rover wiring harnesses where you can get them for under $500. So, in the scheme of vehicle upgrades, in the context of vehicle upgrades, it doesn't cost that much. Right. And it's a huge benefit to the vehicle, and it will definitely increase the value of your vehicle far more than the cost of the part, right?
Well, and in some cases, like your enjoyment of the vehicle, because your shit just works as it should, right? You don't have headlights all of a sudden turning off. It does. Things that just work, switches that do what they're supposed to do, all that sort of business.
Yeah, old wiring is definitely a liability, for a few reasons. If it's cloth wiring, often the colors of the cloth have faded to the point where it's not visible. You can't tell which circuit is what, which makes tracing problems difficult, and it makes making upgrades difficult, just difficult. And of course the insulation on the wiring breaks down over time, and that can lead to shorts, and that's also unsafe, for the vehicle. So a new wiring harness is definitely an upgrade that is worthwhile. We sell vehicle wiring harnesses for all the series Land Rovers, and some of them are slightly more involved than the others, but I would say without exception, they're almost all under $500. And that includes, the main wiring harness and usually the tail harness that runs through the chassis, and the headlight pigtails and other lighting accessories and battery cables and so forth are also available. We have all that stuff, and it's worth getting that stuff too. Battery cables are a huge source of problems. The terminals get corroded, and they just are problematic. It's slow starting, ground problems, like a lot of that can be traced to battery cables. But back to the main harness, I think a lot of people are super intimidated by wiring harnesses, and they're like, oh, there's just so much material, and really it's just a bunch of small jobs, just like anything else. And if you have any level of patience at all, I think that most people can get through wiring a Land Rover. They're pretty simple. There's not that many circuits, and as long as you have basic understanding of what's happening, it's hard to really screw it up, and it's easy to test the circuits individually before you apply battery power to it to prevent disaster, But huge upgrade. I think a lot of people are, like I said, intimidated by it, but there's also a lot of things that people overlook, and supporting the harness is one of those, You see a lot of cars that have new harnesses installed, and then they're just flapping around, and there's like bunches of wires everywhere. It's not very tidy. Yeah. And, that happens over time when people make repairs. They take the harness out of the original clips, and then they don't put it back. So it's important to support the harness so that it's not pulling on the terminals, causing further electrical problems. Another thing that people overlook is they're like, oh, my turn signals don't work, my heater doesn't work, whatever electrical accessory isn't working. They're like, I'm going to put a new harness in their car. Well, that's not going to fix the light that's broken. If the light's broken and you run a new wire to it, that's not going to automatically make that work. So
that's right.
We definitely get a lot of customers that come to us and they say, oh, all these things aren't working, and so, getting those things working and replacing the harness often are two separate tasks, right? So to get that turn signal switch working again, you got to either rebuild it or replace it. And, putting new wiring harnesses isn't going to make that switch work. So,
and what do you use something like a power probe or power scan or something like that to energize those circuits individually?
Yeah, basically you can, if you don't have one of those, you can just use a battery charger with some electrical leads on it, and then you can test each circuit. But, the wiring diagrams are really good for Land Rovers.
Yeah, they are really good, yeah.
The harnesses that are available are very good. There's several differences over the span of series Land Rover production. And there's a few, little tricks to it. But, one thing that the Land Rover harnesses follow also is sort of the generic British wiring color schematics. So, green and white is typically always right, regardless of the type of car that it's on in the British manufacturing. And green and red is the left turn signal. And, brown is unswitched power and green is switched power. And, I could go on, but, if you do enough of these, you can recognize what every single wire goes to without looking at the wiring diagram, right? That purple is the dome light. That green and black is the fuel sending unit.
Fuel sending unit. And if you look online, and again, double check your sources, but many people have taken the series wiring diagrams, which are black and white, and labeled by letter as to what color the wires are, and they've put a colored wire over top so that if you find that a little easier to follow, we here at the shop have a whole set that are colored so that, one of my shop assistants or something is doing it. They don't have to go and look up the little codes, because the codes sometimes are obvious, like B is blue, or something like that. It actually isn't B, isn't blue, it's black. But there's some of those, and having them simply color coded, or even if you sit one night with your manual and some Sharpies and just do it over top, when you're in the pinch and you're upside down and snaked your way inside of a headlight thing, and you're like, what color is this supposed to be? Having a chart that's been color coded for you is sometimes nice too.
So some recommendations I would make to people is, when they go to do their harness, I think there's a few things that happen. One is there's a reluctance to remove the old harness. You're like, I'm just going to disconnect everything, and then I'm going to maybe lay the new one over. Just do yourself a favor.
Yeah.
That's going to confuse you to have two wiring harnesses kind of in the same place. Just remove the old harness, but save it, because oftentimes there's a sub harness especially in some of the later models for the hazard switches or the heater or something like that, that's handy to reference as you're installing the new harness. It's also handy to lay the old harness out on the floor. Take plenty of photos before and after you take the harness out. And if you aren't comfortable with the harness and you feel like you're referencing the wiring diagram too much, like going back and forth, 100,000 times, you can get these little wiring labels that are actually quite tidy, and you can just label each wire. No one's going to criticize you for that. It's fine. Just label the wires, and then where they go. I think that's helpful. And then, also another thing that's helpful is having the correct terminal pliers. There's two different types of pliers that are used to put the little bullet terminals on the ends of the wires. There's a crimping bullet terminal plier, and then there's another one that presses the two into the bullet sleeve. I feel like those are like $50 for the pair, and well worth it.
Absolutely.
Even if you sell it to another enthusiast, you never do another wiring harness in your whole life, that is a super handy thing to have. And then, obviously there's a lot of support. So there's Facebook groups, there's local clubs, there's all kinds of people who are willing to help with this project. We're willing to help with this project. If you buy a harness from us, obviously we'll help you, get it installed. But it's not, I don't feel like it's overwhelming as I think a lot of people make it out to be. It's not so bad.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of those things where, referencing, just trust that the manual for the most part, use that as your guide and maybe not the wiring harness that's already in there, because you don't know who's been through that thing at some point and has plugged everything into the wrong spot, and that's why your shit isn't working.
They have a tendency to be modified, harnesses do over time, and electrical equipment added and that sort of thing. But I think the number of series Land Rovers with their original harnesses in it is, that run and still mostly work is incredibly high. Like, people always complain about Lucas wiring, and honestly, the wiring harnesses in Land Rovers are pretty bulletproof. There's a lot of 60, 70-year-old wiring harnesses out there still running around, and yes, they're getting long in the tooth, and yes, they should probably be replaced. But, this is a job that you can do maybe once in your vehicle ownership, and it'll pay dividends, trust me.
Yeah, without question. Yeah, definitely a worthwhile weekend or several weekend project, depending on your.
I think you can do it in a weekend.
Oh, for sure you could. Yeah,
I think you do it in a weekend, and especially if you have an understanding of electrical principles ahead of time. But even if you're not an electrician, even if you're not, you can follow a wiring diagram and you can keep the color code straight. It's mostly plug and play.
Yeah, it literally is. I mean, it all just plugs in. For the most part.
And if you're plugging the same color wires into the other same colored wires, I mean, it's mostly pretty straightforward. It's time consuming. Don't get me wrong. It's a little tedious. It is. And sometimes there's contortions getting, the wiring routed to the way it's supposed to be. Another thing I would suggest is, when you do pull the old chassis harness out, tape the new chassis harness to it to pull the new one in at the same time. That will save you an unbelievable amount of headache.
Oh my God. Or at least a pull string or something. Yeah, definitely don't pull it out and just leave it out. Just definitely pull something else
Makes
through.
it a lot easier to pull the new one in at the same time.
Yeah, it does. Sure. That is a difficult thing to do.
And if you don't have time for it and you can't do it, we're happy to do it. We do them all the time. We've done hundreds of these wiring harnesses.
Yeah. That's Linus. Every time he closes his eyes, he sees a wiring harness. That's just how it is. It's burned in the back of his eyelids. So, well, with that, we've run out of time for this week. But if you have wiring harness questions, or even if you're mid-wiring harness, if you're trapped in a wiring harness, like a boa constrictor conversation, please hit us up on the old Instagram or anything like that. We'd love to see the progress. Or join the old Facebook group, the old Underpowered Hour Facebook group. If you're looking for a Freelander for sale, literally every single one in the world gets posted there. So you can go ahead and pick one up in that, and we'll go from there. So how's things in the workshop? Hopefully great for you. We'd love to see it. And until next week, good luck and Godspeed on whatever crazy Land Rover project you're working on now.
See you in the shop, Stephen.
The Underpowered Hour is produced by Liza Beres, Ike Goss, and me, Steve Beres. Pavel Svardov composed and performed our theme music. Consider supporting the show on Patreon, and if you already do, thank you. Your support makes the show possible. For even more, check out our Instagram or Facebook.